Ancient Greece was a civilization with a rich cultural heritage and a history spanning over several centuries. While many of their practices and beliefs may seem bizarre to us today, they were considered normal in their time. It's worth noting that many of the practices considered bizarre or shocking by modern standards were not necessarily viewed as such by the people of ancient Greece, and were seen as a normal part of their religious and cultural traditions. That being said, here are some examples of sacrificial and sexual practices in ancient Greece that may be considered bizarre or shocking by modern standards. The cult of Cybele, also known as the Magna Mater, was a mystery religion that originated in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and spread to Greece and Rome during the Hellenistic period. The cult centered around the worship of the goddess Sibley, also known as the Great Mother, who was associated with fertility, nature, and the earth. One of the most distinctive aspects of the cult of Cybele was the practice of self-castration by its male adherents, who were known as Galli. This practice was believed to symbolize the union of the male and female aspects of the self, and was seen as a way of achieving spiritual purity. The Galli were known for their ecstatic and frenzied rituals, which involved self-flagellation, drumming, dancing, and chanting. The castration of the Galli was performed as a part of a religious ceremony and was typically done in early adulthood. The procedure involved the removal of the testicles and sometimes also the penis. After the castration, the Galli would dress in women's clothing and adopt feminine mannerisms, often becoming temple servants and priests of Cybele. It's worth noting that not all members of the cult of Cybele were castrated, and some women also participated in the cult's rituals. The Galli were highly respected in ancient Greece and Rome, and were often employed as priests and healers. The cult of Cybele was especially popular in Rome, where it was adopted by the Roman state as an official cult in the late 3rd century BCE. The cult's popularity continued to grow in Rome, and it remained an important part of the Roman religious landscape until the 4th century CE. In addition to self-castration, the cult of Cybele was known for its other distinctive practices, including the use of music and dance to achieve a state of ecstatic communion with the divine, the use of hallucinogenic drugs, and the celebration of the spring festival of Megalesia, which was dedicated to Cybele. Overall, the cult of Cybele was a complex and multifaceted religious movement that played an important role in the religious and cultural landscape of ancient Greece and Rome. While the practice of self-castration may seem shocking to us today, it was seen as a normal part of the religious traditions of that time, and was viewed by its adherents as a way of achieving spiritual purity and union with the divine. Pederasty, which refers to the sexual relationship between an adult man, the Pederasty, and an adolescent boy, the Eromenos, was a common practice in ancient Greece, particularly among the upper classes. While it was not universally accepted, Pederasty was widely practiced and was viewed as a normal part of the social and cultural fabric of the time. The age difference between the Pederasty and the Eromenos was typically quite large, with the Eromenos usually being between the ages of 12 and 18, while the Pederasty could be as much as 30 years older. In some cases, the relationship would continue even after the boy had grown into adulthood, but in most cases, the relationship would end once the boy reached his late teens. Pederasty was typically practiced between men of different social status, with the Pederasty being of higher social standing than the Eromenos. The relationship was often seen as a way for the Eromenos to gain access to the social and political networks of the Pederasty. In ancient Greece, the practice of pederasty was often associated with the education of young boys. The Pederasty would act as a mentor to the Eromenos, teaching him about philosophy, politics, and other important subjects. This education was seen as a way of preparing the boy for adult life and giving him the skills he needed to succeed in ancient Greek society. Pederasty was not only accepted in ancient Greece, but it was also celebrated in literature, art, and other cultural forms. Many famous Greek philosophers, poets, and politicians were known to have engaged in pederastic relationships, and it was not uncommon for men to openly discuss their relationships with adolescent boys. While pederasty was widely practiced in ancient Greece, it was not without its critics. Some writers, such as Plato, expressed concerns about the potential for the relationship to be exploitative, and there are accounts of boys being mistreated or taken advantage of by their Pederasties. In addition, some men who engaged in pederastic relationships were stigmatized in later life, with their sexual preferences being seen as a sign of weakness or moral depravity. Overall, pederasty was a complex and controversial practice in ancient Greece that played an important role in the social and cultural landscape of the time. It was viewed as a normal part of life by many ancient Greeks and was seen as a way of preparing young boys for adult life and giving them the skills they needed to succeed in ancient Greek society. Dionysus was the Greek god of wine, fertility, ecstasy, and theater. The cult of Dionysus was one of the most important and influential religious movements in ancient Greece, and it had a significant impact on Greek culture, art, and society. The cult of Dionysus involved wild and frenzied orgies that were often accompanied by drinking, dancing, and sexual activity. These rituals were believed to be a way of connecting with the divine and experiencing spiritual transcendence. The cult challenged traditional Greek social norms and hierarchies. The cult was open to all members of society, including women, slaves, and foreigners, and it often involved role-playing and the breaking down of social barriers. It was known for its violent and destructive rituals, including animal sacrifice and the tearing apart of live animals with bare hands. The followers of Dionysus believed that this violence was necessary in order to experience spiritual rebirth and transformation. The cult of Dionysus was centered around the concept of transformation. The followers of Dionysus believed that through their wild and frenzied rituals, they could transcend their ordinary selves and become one with the divine. The Bacchanalia were a series of secret festivals held in honor of Dionysus. These festivals were notorious for their wild and licentious behavior, and they were eventually outlawed by the Roman authorities due to their perceived threat to public order and morality. The cult of Dionysus was a complex and controversial religious movement in ancient Greece that challenged traditional social norms and hierarchies. It was an integral part of Greek culture and society, and it had a significant impact on the development of art, theater, and philosophy in ancient Greece. The concept of sacred prostitution in ancient Greece refers to the practice of temple prostitution, where women would engage in sexual acts with male worshippers as part of their religious duties. The cult of Aphrodite in ancient Greece was closely associated with this practice, as Aphrodite was the goddess of love, beauty, and sexuality. The purpose of sacred prostitution was to honor the goddess Aphrodite and to ensure her blessings upon the community. The sexual acts were believed to be a form of worship and a way to connect with the divine. Women who engaged in sacred prostitution were considered to be serving a religious duty and were highly respected within the community. They were often seen as holy figures who possessed special powers and were able to bring good fortune to those who sought their services. Women who engaged in sacred prostitution enjoyed a higher social status than other women in ancient Greek society. They were often educated, well-traveled, and financially independent, and they had access to certain privileges that were not available to other women. Sacred prostitution was believed to establish a direct relationship between the worshippers and the gods. It was thought that the sexual acts would bring the worshippers closer to the divine and would help to facilitate communication between the two. The practice of sacred prostitution declined over time as the influence of the Greek religion waned. With the rise of Christianity and the decline of the ancient Greek culture, the practice of sacred prostitution became increasingly stigmatized and was eventually abolished. Overall, the cult of sacred prostitution in ancient Greece was a complex and controversial practice that was closely associated with the worship of the goddess Aphrodite. It was a part of the religious and social fabric of ancient Greek society, and it played an important role in the cultural and religious traditions of the time. While some of these practices may seem shocking or even abhorrent to us in modern times, it is important to remember that they were an integral part of the religious and social fabric of ancient Greek society. They played a significant role in shaping the cultural and artistic traditions of the time and influenced the development of philosophy, literature, and art for centuries to come. Thanks for watching.